If you frequently feel overwhelmed, or if you are feeling overwhelmed right now, this video is going to help. I'm going to share powerful ways to get out of overwhelm. But first, we have to get out of the physiological state of overwhelm. So, overwhelm is one of the worst feelings. I hate it. And one of the definitions of overwhelm is to be submerged, is to be like drowning. So I know that's how it feels for some people, and others feel like there's a weight on them, or they feel defeated or just totally powerless. And in fact, overwhelm is a manifestation of the freeze response. So it's super important to understand this if you get overwhelmed, because when we get overwhelmed, we feel shut down, we feel powerless, we might even begin to feel numb. So we don't necessarily identify it as a highly anxious state, but actually, the freeze response is the most anxious of the three responses, right? You know, the fight, flight, freeze response. So we have this part of our brain that wants to protect us from danger. And this part of our brain does not differentiate between a saber-toothed tiger attacking us and an exam that we're worried about, or a boss that scares us a bit. Our brain reacts with the same fight, flight, or freeze, whether it's a physical danger or not. But basically, the freeze response is a state that we get to when we are faced with an overwhelming danger. So the very first thing that will help you if you are feeling overwhelmed is to back away from that freeze state or from that high level of anxiety by re-regulating your emotions. So physically, the tools for doing this are diaphragmatic breathing, grounding techniques. I have videos on all of these. I can link some of them here and also at the end of this video. But those kind of tools that help us physiologically calm down, that's the first thing that's needed. Now, this is going to feel totally counterintuitive, because when we're overwhelmed and we have too much to do and too many projects and we can't get them all done and time is rushing, the last thing we want to do is take a break. But honestly, it's the only thing that is going to help. So my recommendation is to first take care of that physiological state. And if you think about it as an extreme anxiety response, that will help you implement the tools to begin to calm yourself physically. And cognitively, overwhelm is all about what's not happening now. Overwhelm is all about the future, worry, anticipation. I have to do this or else da 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 da. I have to get this project done or I'll lose my job. I have to get to this party on time or my friend will be mad at me. I have to get to my therapist on time or I'll be missing session time that I paid for. Whatever it is, it's all about the future, worry, anticipation. It's not like right in the moment. Then the next piece is to look at some of those cognitions, like really look at them. See if you can take an observer point of view, step back, and what is the thinking that's leading to the overwhelm? Is it the people-pleasing fear of not being on time for a friend? Is it the catastrophizing about not doing well enough at your job? What is actually going on with those thoughts, and where can you put some question marks in them? Because there are probably some cognitive distortions driving your overwhelm. Now, this isn't to say that you don't have too much to do, because I remember when I was overwhelmed a lot. When my kids were young, I was the sole financial support. I was working. I was trying to handle three children. I was overwhelmed a lot. And it was strange because one of the things that would overwhelm me the most was the paperwork for their schools. Like, things weren't all online then. I wish they had been, because that is easier for me. But I would just have paperwork piled up and the paperwork would have deadlines. And I would look at that paperwork and I'd actually go into sort of a freeze, shutdown state, like just can't do it. So the thing that actually put me the most into the overwhelmed freeze state was probably the most minor, but anyway. We all have like what triggers us into overwhelm, but it's just interesting to look at that and see what cognitive distortions are going with it. So that's really using that observer part of the brain that I talk a lot about in my videos to kind of look at our thoughts rather than being totally caught in them and believing them all. let's take a little distance from them. So once you're feeling physiologically calmer, you really have a choice point. You can really take a moment and say to yourself, do I need more of a break? And while you're looking at your thoughts, I'd like you to bring in a thought and feeling of, I'm an okay human being who has too much to do. It's not that there's something wrong with me, that I can't get everything done. I simply have too much to do. So I really would like you to bring in some element of compassion for yourself because being a human being is hard. It really is hard. So just bring in a little bit of giving yourself an acknowledgement for how much you do and give yourself a bit of an emotional break. Okay. So once you've done those things, then you have a choice point. So thinking through, do I need to take a little bit more of a break here before I tackle my to do list? Or is it better and I feel calm enough that I can jump in and really begin to prioritize? So think about that because if you need a little bit more of a break, take a little bit more of a break. Remember that overwhelm is an extreme anxiety response and it can take some time to calm down. And if you do have too much on your plate, the best way to sort it through is with full brain thinking. We want your whole brain online to problem solve and to think things through. Because when we are being driven by that anxiety response, that fight, flight, freeze, we are in urgent panic mode and we're not really thinking clearly. Our risk assessment's not fully online. Our ability to really analyze, not get stuck in analysis paralysis, but our ability to really analyze, not online. So for this next part of this video, I'm going to assume that you have calmed down physically and you're ready to sort of take a look at what is on your plate with a different frame of mind. And I want to share a framework with you. Now, this framework is very well known. It's called the Eisenhower Matrix. So, the Eisenhower Matrix is also often called the Urgent Important Matrix. And I'm going to show it here. But it basically says to divvy up your tasks into one of these four quadrants. And it looks at how urgent it is and how important it is. So most of the things that put us into overwhelm, like when I think back to the paperwork that would put me into overwhelm, that probably was relatively low important, but time sensitive, right? So it had a time urgency to it, but it wasn't like life or death. So a lot of the things that put us into overwhelm are actually in the low importance category. Because if we think about our priorities, what's your real priority? Our priorities often are living a happy life, right? Strengthening our relationships, taking care of our kids if we have kids, right? Or having a relationship with our partner or our friends. The things that make life meaningful are really the things that are the most important, and those are almost never urgent. But I want to tell you what I'd like to change about this matrix, and I think the one I'll devise right now will be more useful for you because this term urgency is very tricky for people who have anxiety or people like myself who would tend to feel like everything was urgent, right? At some point in my life, I realized the only thing that's highly important and highly urgent requires like a 911 call. It's an emergency. It requires a visit to the hospital, a call for the police, right? Most of the things we are dealing with are not actually urgent. Now, this might be a matter of semantics, but I kind of think it's really helpful for people who struggle with anxiety and this constant feel of urgency. But the term urgency really means like gravity, critically important, needs immediate attention, right? So even things that are very important to us and are time sensitive, let's say you have a project, it's due in 3 hours. Yes, you need to pay attention to that now. You need to begin to focus on it, but it doesn't require the same type of attention that you would need if you needed to call 911. So rather than calling it urgent in all of these boxes, I would rather create a fifth box that is for very important and urgent, which means call 911, get to the emergency room. I hate to give too many examples on videos where people who are anxious are watching, but I remember when one of my kids fell in a swimming pool. That was urgent and immediate. They were too little. They didn't know how to swim. Boom, I was in that water. I grabbed them. I pulled them out. Thank goodness. That didn't require planning. It didn't require any thinking. It was immediate and urgent and highly important. So that's the kind of thing that goes into this fifth box. And my guess is that nothing on your plate right now that's causing overwhelm is really at that level. And then let's change the name of urgent to time sensitive. So the top two boxes will be things that are time sensitive but low importance, and time sensitive high importance. So thinking about it this way can really help you figure out your priorities of where you need to spend your time now. And let's say you have a number of things that are time sensitive, high importance, and the deadlines are too short, can't do them all. Well, that might just sort of be a fact. So it might require making a choice among them. It might require asking for help. It might require delegating more. It might require calling a client and delaying a deadline. There might be some action that isn't comfortable that you need to pull in to take care of the fact that you physically can't do all of it. But if you approach this with the feeling of, I'm an okay human being, I'm okay as I am, and I have too much to do, you'll be able to think of those solutions. Now, I know a lot of people would say to me, yeah, but I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't feel like I'm okay as I am. And that's why I stress in a lot of my videos this concept of our negative core belief that we learn very young, and which is really at the core of a lot of our difficult emotions, difficult situations we get into, and learning what our negative core beliefs are, why they developed, and what we can do about them to change them is super important. And I do have a free PDF called Transform Your Negative Core Belief. It helps you walk through like what exactly is that negative core belief, and then some very practical things you can implement right away to begin to reverse that. And if you're somebody who frequently struggles with overwhelm and you tend to overcommit, stay tuned, subscribe to my channel, because next week I'll be coming out with a video on how to stop overcommitting. And honestly, one reason we overcommit also tied to those negative core beliefs. So could you let me know if this was helpful for you? Could you let me know if understanding that freeze response and that overwhelm is an extreme anxiety response that turns into a freeze and a shutdown state? Let me know if it's helpful to think about it that way. Any questions? Put them in the comments, and I will see you guys next week.